But I'll start out like Steve Martin, kind of, in that movie. I was born a white girl in the city of Mount Air. I almost said what he said, but I thought, no, that might be inappropriate.
Well, we don't stop at inappropriate ears. So.
Well, that's good. Yeah, my parents met at Graceland. Mom came from Dow City, Iowa, and Dad came from Midland, Michigan. And after they graduated, they got married, and Mom went to Pleasantville to be a teacher. And Dad went to Des Moines to work in construction. He was a business major, and she was a...
What was his name?
Ben Yerington is my dad. Okay. Anna Lou Anderson is my mom, Yerington. And my mom became pregnant with me that year, and she had a student that said, I think you should call her your... She didn't know I was going to be a girl, of course. Banana, because your husband's name is Ben and your name is Anna. You've probably heard that story before. So they took her advice and just shortened it to Benna. So that worked out okay. And at the end of that year, they moved back to Lamoni, and Dad bought the bakery from Bert and Gladys Somebody. Would you know, Lou? And
what was the question?
did you know Bert and Gladys, who owned the bakery in Lamoni?
Yes.
Okay, well, Dad bought that bakery. And Bert taught Dad how to decorate cakes, how to make donuts, and mass-produce bread. Because they delivered bread just like they did milk back in those days. And it was going along fine. They used to give me a donut when I would cry. And that worked well. Until Dad discovered that he was allergic to flour. Sneezing, had a runny nose, and he figured out it was the flour. So they moved back to Midland, Michigan, where he joined the police force there, and Mom had 2 more babies. My sister first, then my brother. My sister is just 18 months younger than me. And we lived there till the middle of my kindergarten year. I moved a lot in my elementary school age and younger ages. And they moved to East Lansing, Michigan, where they both went back to school at Michigan State University. Dad to get a degree in social work, and Mom, after we were a little bit older, her bachelor's degree in education. And we moved a lot in that time. At first we lived in on campus in Quonset huts. You know what those are, the half metal. And it was full of kids, that area. So I remember a lot of fun times playing, riding my bike. There's a big grassy area we'd all go and play. I remember one little boy getting stuck in the top of a pine tree, and the fire department had to come and save him. And another time, the assistant coach to the baseball team for MSU lived in the Quonset huts. And his son loved baseball, of course, and so he got together a game once, and I wanted to play. He said, no, you can't play. Please, please let me play. He finally did, and he saw how terrible I was, and he says, you can't play anymore. So I said, oh, just give me one more chance, and he punched me in the stomach. Have you ever been punched in the stomach? It was horrible. But that was the beginning of me learning that I'm just terrible at sports. I'll get at that later. After living there, we think we just lived there a year, we moved to a little house in a kind of a blue-collar neighborhood. It was a blue-collar neighborhood in Lansing, Michigan, which is the capital of Michigan. And what I was going to say about that. Yeah, I had good friends there, Karen Peters and Mary Ojibwe. Most of the people who lived there worked at Oldsmobile plant, you know, the car plant. Have they not heard me this whole time? You guys have.
It helps people that won't admit it.
Oh, okay. And then, what else after that? Then the people who we rented the house from decided that they wanted to sell it. So we quickly looked for another house, and we found a house. We always called it the Barnes house because it was on Barnes Avenue. And it was the same typical type of neighborhood. And I made a lot of friends there too. Sandy Laverty was my best friend. We had a lot of alleyways there, and I remember we wouldn't wear shoes in the summer, and we just would run up and down the stone alleyways, and our feet would get so calloused and black. We couldn't even wash the black off, no matter how hard we scrubbed. And that was the beginning of my time of loving to read. I just read all the time, and even sometimes when Sandy would come and play with me, I'd want to hide because I wanted to keep reading. But my mom would make me go out and play with her. And we had a lot of fun times there. I remember I also liked to ride my bike, and I found this route that I liked to take. So I took it a lot. Is this boring to you, what I'm talking about? No. Okay, good. Anyway, and my mom said one day, I want you to take me where you're riding your bike, because I'd be gone quite a while. So I took her, and the first route, part of the route, was down a boulevard that went through a kind of a shopping area that was so pretty. There was a flower shop, they put their flowers out, and a little outdoor cafe, and I would just take my time riding my bike through there, and once I was past that area, I'd go off to the right up a big hill to a wealthy neighborhood where the houses were beautiful, and I would just ride around looking at the houses and, pick out the ones I liked the best. And then after that, I'd ride down the hill to the river. I think it was a Cedar River, maybe. I can't remember. And there was a trail along that river. So I would ride my bike along the trail, and there were trees, going over the trail and the river, and it was so beautiful. And it took me down to a park that our school used for a playground. So I'd go through the park and then up a hill that went around a big round swimming pool that we used to swim in the summer. And then I'd go down a street, and our house was there in a block. So Mom went on that route with me, and when we got home, I heard her talking to my dad. She said, well, she really enjoys it. I don't know if we should keep her from going. It's kind of dangerous, but, and in the end, they decided it was okay for me, that I was careful enough. I was 3rd or 4th grade, something like that. So, what was I going to talk about next?
What kind of bike did you have? Was it a good bicycle?
What kind of a bike? I don't know. Since I loved bike riding, I had several in my life. I do remember, though, my dad got it from the police compound. At that time, he worked for the MSU police force, the campus police, and they just had a lot of bikes that were left. And this was a little child's bike, but I used that for a long time. And, I was going to tell you about a time when we lived in the Quonset huts, when I think it was a spiritual experience. There was a friend that I had in Midland when we lived there, when I was in kindergarten, who was very ill. And every night at dinner time, I'd ask my family to pray for him. And one evening, they were about to say the prayer, and they said, don't you want us to pray for whoever it was? And I said, no, because he's all well. And they said, well, how do you know he's well? Well, I don't know. I think you told me, Mom. Did you tell me that he was well? No, I don't know how he's doing. So there was nobody else that could tell me about him. So she called up his family after we ate dinner, and his mother said, yes, he's completely well. We have no worries anymore. So my parents said, we think that an angel told you that in your dreams. So I don't know. But actually that, introduced me to the thought that there's outside forces helping us in our lives, that give us comfort and guidance. Okay, so back to the Barnes house.
You're not gonna tell them about suppers on the MSU campus? Squirrels and rabbits?
Oh, yeah. Well, my dad, this was probably against the law. He was on the police force there. Our family wasn't making very much money then. It was just Dad on the police force, and he would, of course, he had his gun with him, And if he saw a rabbit in a non-habited place, you know, forest or something, he'd shoot it and we'd have it for supper the next night. So, you know, well, you know, save money, and I always got the part with the bullet hole in it, I remember. So, yeah, that wasn't very fun. So, yeah, I talked about that house, and then we moved to the Barnes house. Barnes also had a green stamp building behind it. You remember green stamps? We'd collect them, and we would love to climb up on that roof. And we would look down in the turbines, you know, moving the air movers, and we could watch the workers work and smell the cardboard boxes. I'll never forget that smell. I still like. Until the workers there went to my parents and said that we were doing this, and they didn't want us to do it anymore. So we didn't. Well, I think we did once in a while, but not as often. So after that, I think maybe Dad graduated then with his degree in social work, and he got a job working for Big Brothers of Lansing, Michigan. And then his next two jobs were working with people with cerebral palsy. He worked for Easter Seals of what was I going to say, Lansing. And then his next job in Iowa was working for United Cerebral Palsy for the state of Iowa. Anyway, so Mom, while Dad was working with his degree in social work, finished her degree in education, and while she was doing her student teaching in a little town just outside of Lansing, she couldn't be there at home with us for lunch. Because in Michigan, at that time anyway, they didn't have cafeterias for the kids in the elementary school. So the kids would walk home for lunch and then walk back. And so Mom started leaving out like a can of soup and something to make sandwiches with. I think I was 4th or 5th grade. I was the oldest, of course. So we'd walk home and I'd fix lunch. We probably did it together. But one day, Mom, she either didn't have anything to set out or she forgot, I don't know. But we picked out food for ourselves, and it was cream of mushroom soup and sauerkraut, which we thought was fine. We liked both things. Mom called and said, because she always called every day to see how we were doing, and she said, well, what did you end up eating for lunch? And I said, oh, sauerkraut and cream of mushroom soup. And she said, later on, she said, when she hung up the phone, she just cried. She felt like a terrible mother. Well, we didn't think so. We thought it was all right. So, when she was finished with that, and eventually Dad got this job in Iowa, and we moved to Des Moines, and we got a rental house on 59th Street. Anybody know Des Moines enough to know where that is? Kind of in the middle of Des Moines. And I went to Franklin Junior High. That was the year I started junior high. And I really liked that school. It was good. But we only lived there for a year. I'm trying to think of any stories about that place. And then we had a house built in Ankeny, Iowa. They decided they wanted to live in Ankeny because it had a good school system. And the house, the inside of it, the floor plan, was very much like the Hartwick's house here in Lamoni. It was a little bit bigger, but very much the same. When I first went in their house, I thought, oh my gosh, this is like the house I lived in from 8th grade through high school.
Well, you were smaller back then.
That's true. Quite a bit smaller. Anyway, Ankeny was a great place to live too. And that's where I learned that I was terrible in athletics. I tried everything. I thought I would like it. It looked like fun. At first I went out for basketball. Terrible. I was too nervous. I kept feeling my vision would go black and I thought I would faint. I was really nervous about it for some reason. And then I tried volleyball. Terrible at that. I tried golf. couldn't even hit the ball. Tried tennis, same thing. And then I tried track. I loved track. I loved jumping the hurdles and running, but I got terrible shin splints because in the winter we'd run inside on the marble hallways and stairs, and I liked to run barefoot. So I went to see the doctor about it, and he said, girls should not be involved in athletics. They're just not made for it. And I knew that was wrong because my mother was a very good athlete in basketball. So I knew he was wrong. And he said, well, when you get better, you can go back and run. So I tried a couple of times, but the shin splints just came back. And it was really painful. I walked like I walk now, with kind of a limp. Anyway, where am I going? Oh, I was going to talk about Dad. His work with people with United Cerebral Palsy allowed him to have close relationships with people with that handicap. And something I was going to pull out here. And most, if not all of them, had serious speech impediments. And they would call our house and ask for Dad. And when we kids answered, we couldn't understand them at all. So we'd just say, just a minute, we'll get our dad. But Dad could understand them. He worked with them every day, and so he knew how to understand them. Mom got a job in Ankeny. She got certified in special ed and taught Des Moines for a while, and then she got a job teaching 5th grade in Ankeny. And later on in her career in Ankeny, she was voted one of the best educators. So I found that looking at pictures, so I thought I'd pass it around. Anyway, and so what else about that? Oh, yeah, I always wanted to play the oboe, but the way we moved, I never was in a year when they started people on musical instruments. I took piano lessons, and that's about it. I only can play well enough for my own enjoyment. So, what's next? After high school, I thought I'd like to be a social worker, a different kind than Dad, the kind that's an advocate for families, or I thought I'd like to be a child psychologist. Of course, I went to Graceland, and my freshman year there, people started talking to me about how I'd be a good nurse. I had read the Cherry Ames books in junior high. Anybody read those books? No. Did you read them? Yes.
Cliff's notes, yeah.
So I kind of knew, what nursing was about. And finally, Kate Blair, her daughter Diane was one of my best friends. My roommates said to me, you should go talk to Margaret McKevitt. She's here once a week. Make an appointment and talk to her. So I thought, well, what the heck? So I went to talk to her, and she ended up being one of my mom's best friends at Graceland, which was kind of cool. And she did talk me into going into nursing. And I had some experience, actually, come to think of it, with my Aunt Florence. She was dying of breast cancer. Her husband needed to go back to work as a barber. And my summer job was working at an entomology research farm for ISU, where we cut out egg masses of corn borers and put them on cornrow shaped, this is too much information probably, but that just lasted part of the summer. And so my dad volunteered me to go take care of my Aunt Florence. And when I got there, I realized I was just way over my head. I didn't really know how to take good care of people in that bedridden situation. But my Aunt Florence, my great Aunt Florence, was a very in-charge woman, even at that time in her life. So she would tell me what to do. And even when I helped her to the bathroom once and she fell between the toilet and the bathtub, there's no way I could get her out. So she said, you need to go call the neighbor, and she told me his name and number, and he helped me get her up, and she died while I was there. And that was a good experience for me, because I saw how my grandma handled a funeral. She just started calling all the relatives and the friends and started making food to feed everybody. And my Aunt Florence's daughter was Kay Bunch. Do you remember Kay? And she was in Independence at the time, not Independence, Tahiti. And she had such guilt that she wasn't there, that I was there instead of her. But there was no way. She had 2 little girls to take care of, and you know, it was a good experience for me. And I remembered she had no dress to wear to the funeral. And here I am, almost 5'10", and she, what is she, 5'2"? She asked me if she could wear one of my dresses, and I said sure, and it fit her perfectly. Isn't that amazing? The things we remember. So, where was I? Okay. After I decided to be a nurse, I had to make up some coursework. I had to take inorganic chemistry that summer at DMAC. But I also took a job, I can't believe I did this, at VA Medical Center as a nursing assistant. I still knew nothing about taking care of people. I knew how to do vital signs. They taught us that our freshman year. And I worked on a medical floor that had 3 giant wards of men. Of course, it was all men. And oh my goodness, the experiences I had there, I won't go into that except for one. I was giving a black man a bath, a bed bath, and I kept scrubbing him, and the washcloth would come back gray or brown. I'd rinse it out and wash him again. He said, "You're never going to get that color off your washcloth." I was just mortified, so embarrassed. I should have realized that the melanin would come off, when you wash them. Just like it does for us, we just can't see it. So, all in all, it was a good experience to work there. Am I telling too much stuff? No? Okay, good. So,
I didn't know that, Benna.
didn't you? I didn't either.
Is that true for every person of color?
It's true for everyone. Our pinkish, tannish, we just can't see it, comes off.
But you can see it with a black person?
With a white wash.
Yeah, with the white washcloth.
Oh.
3/4 of the house does is skin cells. Does that make you feel better?
So anyway, no, I didn't start that year. So next year, I was still at Graceland, my sophomore year. And since I was in the science building a lot more with nursing, I started to see Mark around a lot more. Not only did he take classes there, but he was a math tutor and a lab assistant. And I found him to be very attractive.
Go figure.
Mark, what was Mark's last name?
Christmas,
was that?
Easter, I don't
I was
know.
gonna say, it's changed.
So, did you notice me too? I don't know. I'm sure he did. Of course he did. Anyway, so just so we could get to know each other, I stuck my head in his tutor office one day and said, "Do you know where Dr. Grable's office is?" I knew where it was. He said, "Yeah, it's just down the hall, second door to the right," or whatever. I can't remember. So we met another time in the mail and where our post office boxes were. And the next thing I remember, we were going out on a screw your roommate date. And we went to the movie in the MSC, The Guns of Navarone.
Yeah.
And he had us sit in this long row of fonts men.
We were on
So-
the,
He really didn't talk to me the whole time.
We're watching a movie, right?
He kept joking around with his friends. Oh, no, I don't know what they're saying. And at the Fonts house used to say, 98. And art. They tried to say it so you couldn't tell who was saying it, but as loud as they could. Yeah, you remember that. Well, and then when we're at Graceland.
I remember
we
that.
were, so.
There's a brick on the brick plaza that says 98.
Really? Must have been a Fonts man. so, yeah, we just kept dating, and
The rest of the story.
I think 3 months later, he gave me a kiss finally. It took him a long time. 2 or 3 months.
Never
Oh,
stopped.
my God.
So, you know the rest of the story. And what else can I'm saving the spiritual stuff till end. Is that okay? I wrote notes on it.
So how long, when did you get married?
1976, the spring we graduated, it was during World Conference. We thought, well, everybody will be here anyway. And it was a good decision, except that Mark had to go back down to Graceland right after we got married, and I had to stay in Independence. We did take that week of World Conference to have a vacation down in Branson. But other than that, that was kind of
I
hard.
was at Roaring River State Park,
Roaring River State Park. Yeah.
Ready?
not Branson.
Oh, yeah, well, that
You know,
area.
the
Anyway,
honeymoon.
yeah, so,
So Joe Bagley is a saint, because he was my roommate for the last 6 weeks of Graceland.
wasn't that long, 6
Six
weeks.
weeks.
Hey, Benna, what year was that?
1976. It was a bicentennial year, and most people who got married that year had red, white, and blue as their colors. We didn't, but we went to a lot of weddings that year, as you do,
When you're senior.
the year you graduate.
Where did you get married?
What's that?
Where did you get married at?
Ridgewood Pleasant Heights Church in Independence. Yeah. I didn't talk about my nursing education. Every rotation I went through, I just found really interesting, enjoyable. I lived in a little white house with 4 other students across from, they called it Independence Regional Hospital, after a while, the SAN at first. And, yeah, it was a good time, hard work. Every week we had to write like a care plan about our patients we were assigned. On the weekends, my first year I worked as a CNA at Rest Haven. You all know that. And then my second year, I was able to work at Independence Regional Hospital. I usually worked in ICU there, and at Children's Mercy Hospital. And Mark would come down on the weekends. We tried to take turns, but I didn't have a car, so I'd have to catch a ride. So Mark and his brother shared a car, so he would come and visit when he could. Of course, I'd be working and studying, and I don't know how he did it. He stayed with his grandma who lived there, and I just remember us being in the house with all the girls and all our friends, and we usually made macaroni and cheese or box pizza. And, yeah, so, anything else about that nursing time? When we graduated, I had to choose between, I didn't have to, but my decision was to choose between working at Independence Regional or Children's Mercy, and I decided to go with Independence Regional Hospital. And they assigned me to work half emergency room, half ICU. And I was familiar with ICU as a CNA anyway, so I felt comfortable there. The emergency room, I was more nervous about, mainly because I didn't know where anything was. And if the doctor needed something, I usually didn't know where it was. And so I would be in a panic. Where is Foley catheter or certain medication or whatever, so that was most nerve-wracking. I finally learned where everything was, and it was interesting. In ICU, I worked with 2 of my housemates, Rose Calder and Carolyn Byer.
My roommate at Graceland too.
Oh, yeah.
Rose.
So we enjoyed that, yeah. Rose and I worked closely together because we both worked the evening shift. Carolyn worked the night shift with a really grumpy lady, and we said, "Oh, Carolyn, how are you going to bear this?" And she said, this was typical Carolyn, "She's going to love me after a while." And she did. Carolyn was so upbeat. And I worked the evening shift, and Mark, at first, I don't know why, he held back from applying to medical school for about a year. And his mother even called me and said, you know, you're gonna have to bug Mark about applying to medical school. And I said, well, I don't really want to do that because I don't want him to think I married him because he's going to be a doctor. I want him to be whatever makes him happy. And she just got really quiet. I don't think she knew what to say to that.
That'd be a first.
So, he got a job at 7-Eleven. Doug McCorkle got him a job there, Mindy and Doug McCorkle. And he hated it because so many alcoholics would come in and, you know, get alcohol. And he eventually, I think he only worked there like 2 months, 2 or 3 months.
It seemed like forever, I don't know.
Yeah, he got a job working with his great uncle at Brunson Optical Instruments, which was in a cave on 23rd Street. He worked as a draftsman. And I happened to run into my psych instructor one day, and she asked me how things were going and wondered what I was doing, what my husband was doing, and told her. And she said, my husband goes to Kansas City Osteopathic School. They were Seventh-day Adventists, you know, they were really into health and wellness, and he was really happy with it. So I told Mark about it. Mark had really good high grade point and good MCAT scores and everything. He maybe just needed a break from school, I don't know. But when I told him about it, he applied to Kirksville, Des Moines, and Kansas City and got accepted to all 3. And then the next year, his brother got accepted at Yale Medical School, and he had the same, but it doesn't matter because it's worked out well for him, and I think he enjoyed his career. As Dr. Madley could tell you, that their careers, both of them, were over the top, overwhelmingly too much.
Not there,
What?
a lot there.
Yeah, so I'll let Mark talk about that. But anyway, their education was geared towards general and family practice. I don't think it is so much anymore. I think it's geared towards specialties as much as, don't you, Mark, from what we've learned?
Well, everybody is.
Yeah. Anyway, so I decided to get a job on the day shift so we could see each other. This is kind of jumping around, sorry. And a friend of mine, Rose Calder, actually told me her sister, both of her sisters, they were twins, were nurses, was quitting her job at VA Medical Center, working in dialysis to have a baby. So it would be mostly day shift. So I applied for that job and got it. And who would know that it would prepare me for my future, because I had a son who went into kidney failure and had to get an artificial kidney. So learning as much as, oh my goodness, the orientation that the VA Medical Center gave me and all nurses who went into that area was phenomenal. I just learned so much and really enjoyed it. It was a hospital that had a lot of residents in their nephrology program, so I worked with residents, and we did not only chronic renal dialysis, we did acute, so we'd have to be on call and come in if, you know, like Tom Moraine, he had to have acute dialysis done. It's just temporary renal failure.
Not gonna lie.
Well, he did too, but Tom Moraine did as well. They also had a transplant team who took care of transplants, and we'd have to come in and dialyze the transplant patients before they went in for their, you know, kidney transplant. It was so interesting, and after like a year, the head nurse quit and they asked me to take her place. I was, you know, the youngest one there, but the 2 nurses that were more experienced than me, who were very smart and good, had problems. One was an alcoholic, and the other one, well, I know, really, the other one just had a volatile personality, so I had to think about that one. That was going to be really challenging to take that on. But I'm a very impulsive person. I said, okay, I'll do it. So that meant I had to add scheduling and employee evaluations to my job mainly and other meetings. So, yeah, it went okay.
I don't wanna stop you, Benna,
Yeah.
because this is interesting.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
oh yeah.
that's what I'm saying.
Okay, you want me to move on
Yeah.
to the
Talk about
spiritual part?
your evolution of your view of God.
Yes,
and
okay. You
You
never
got a-
know how long things
You
are
got a
gonna
picture
take.
of God in there?
He might be at the very bottom, okay. Not, I don't mean that, you know. The way it sounded. Let's see, oh, it's on this. I was gonna pass around these pictures too. I just went through and got a bunch. Here's me when I was baptized.
Spiritual.
Yeah, okay. Here's one with my two grandmas. Okay, I'll just pass them around. If you have any questions, you can ask me about them. Okay. I didn't tell about my parents' family. I guess I don't have time for that. What? No, don't, did you say?
No, you don't have time.
Yeah, okay. I was gonna talk about my
Take
mom.
charge, Rick Hintigan.
Okay, I'm gonna make my mom's dementia, as it slowly came on, was actually a spiritual experience, because as she grew into her dementia, but before it was really bad, she lost all ego and was fully love. And it was amazing. Thought, I want to live like this now. Okay, moving on from that, I told about my sick friend. I had a couple of times where I learned how to listen to the Holy Spirit better. When I was at Graceland, I had it was a prompting, it was just a clear thought. Call Sherry Joy, call Sherry Joy. I didn't really even know her that well. So I ignored it until finally I thought, you know, I should probably give her a call just in case. I called her and they said she left Graceland, she dropped out. If I'd called her, you know, maybe I could have helped her. Another time, a friend of mine had cancer. When we were living down in Independence, we went to Sterling Avenue Congregation. We took turns bringing her food, trying to decide what food to bring her. Potato soup kept coming to my mind. Oh, that's not healthy, it's all carbs. So I fixed her a healthy salad. She asked me to stay and eat with her. She just picked at it, and I said, that's not really sounding good to you, is it? And she said, no. And I said, well, what would sound good to you? And she said, potato soup. Wouldn't you know it? Yeah, you're going to think I'm a little bit crazy bringing this up. But starting in high school, I began feeling a homesickness for some place. I didn't know what it could be. I'd never felt that way before. And I just left it alone for a while. And then I concluded it was where I was before I came here. I think it was so wonderful. I didn't have memories of it, but just, you know, what it felt like to be there. So don't think I'm too crazy, but I also started to feel off and on, I still do, a presence with me. And I don't know who it is. I even sometimes have put my hand out because it just feels so strongly. And I have often thought if they took my hand, I'd probably jump out of my skin. But I just do at certain times. I had an experience with Luke Clothier once. Serving communion. I got to her, and this overwhelming feeling of love for her came over me. And I love all of you, so I don't want to pick one person out over another, but after church, she came up to me and said, "Did you feel that love between us?" And I said, "Yes, I did." And from that, I learned love is a palpable thing. It's more than just a feeling in our heart. It can influence the world and touch other people even if we don't say anything. Okay, When my children were getting older, I had evangelist blessing with Val LaRouche because I wasn't sure where to go with my life at that point. And she really helped me with the Holy Spirit through her. She talked about leadership roles I'd have in the church and other things. Oh gosh, I hate when I start crying because I can't stop, it just keeps rolling out. Anyway, so, any of you, if you feel a need, it is very helpful. We have at least one evangelist here in this room who's kind of busy with patient care right now, though. And then I found I have spiritual experiences in my kitchen. I'm almost done, don't worry. I was walking through the kitchen one day, and it was, the only thing I can compare it to is swimming in a lake where you have cold spots and warm spots. And I walked through and I felt a warm spot. It was love, and I walked out of it. I knew it was my grandma Elsie. That was interesting. And then another time, shortly after my dad died, I walked through the kitchen and I felt like a hug to my heart. It wasn't the same type of what I felt with Lou. It was just kind of a warm pressure to my heart. It was unique. So that's it for my spiritual experiences. Anybody have any questions about things that I need to explain more, or maybe the pictures? I don't know. Yes.
You were part of the pastorship for a little while.
For a long,
How
long
long? How long?
11 years. I was with Joe and Rick for 2 years, and then I was with what's his name over there, Stu.
Yeah.
Stu
Tell
and
us
Margie
about
and
the
Rich,
experiences you
yeah.
had there.
Pardon me?
Anything you would like to talk about that time in your life?
Well, I got more in the habit of meditation and prayer at that time for the congregation. And so I practiced that in the evening or in the morning, at least once a day, and just tried to clear my mind to be open to the Holy Spirit about where our congregation should go. And before I started Stone Soup, I went to prayer service as much as I could. And I was greatly ministered to by Lester Stevenson's prayers. Oh my goodness, it's crying. He always prayed for the pastorate.
Yes, he did. He does.
He still does, probably, huh?
Those prayers are not working.
They are too. You guys are doing great, really. I'm so impressed.
Has your concept of God changed from when you were a child?
Oh, yes. I mean, all of us, I'm sure it has greatly. He's not a guy with a long white beard in the sky anymore. But, I could go on and on about that. It's just all about love and compassionate understanding and how we can change the world that way, letting go of ego. I think spiritually that's what I've learned the most, to just grow in love and lose ego. I think we have egos for our survival, really. Yeah.
I was wondering if you had any classes with my dad, or was that after he retired?
Mark did. His classes were too advanced for nurses. So I didn't have. I had Bruce Grable for organic chemistry, and John Edwards for microbiology, and what's her name, Mortimer for Betty Mortimer for anatomy and physiology, Nick Hartwig for genetics, Jim Hawley for math, a lot of math, and that's all I can think of at the top of my head.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you talked about your mother's dementia. And
Yes.
but I'm just fascinated about how you said she lost her ego. Could you talk more about that part of your relationship with your mother, and that you said it was just pure love, and
Yeah,
you seem
yeah.
emotional about that, so I'd like to know a little more.
Okay, I'll try not to get emotional this time. My mother was so wonderful, but she wanted all three of us kids to be perfect. You know, so she would try to influence us and give us suggestions, advice, not always welcomed. So when she had dementia, she stopped doing that. But she also just radiated love. I saw it in her eyes. They just glowed. When I would walk in, I just felt adored. So she also asked me one day, this is kind of interesting, she said, do you ever leave your body and go visit someplace else? And I said, no, I can't do that. Can you, Mom? And she said, yeah. So where do you go? And she said, I go visit the boys, you know, my sons. So I don't know if that was just her imagination, or I'd like to believe that really happened. And the people in that state, you know, they have one foot in this world and one foot in the other world. So that was interesting. Do y'all think I'm crazy yet with these stories about my...
No.
Only the part about Mary and May.
What?
Only the part about Mary and May.
Very, oh, yeah. One thing I loved about Mark, and I still love about him, is he's so helpful, just so generous in giving his help. Even back then, he helped me dissect my cat. He was so good at it. He helped me with statistics from Jim Hawley. I was having trouble with that. He had never had statistics, but he could still do it. And even now, if I tell him I'd like something done, he just gets it done. I don't, you know, it's like he wants to keep me happy for some reason. Which is nice. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you describe more about the presence that you feel? Or,
Oh, I don't know if I can. It's just an awareness that it's there and it's always on my right side. I know that seems maybe I'm a little schizotypical or something. I don't know. That's probably what Mark would say. It just, you know, I don't know. Everything in life is, not everything, but so much is a mystery. And why that happens to me, I don't know. But it just is a strong presence. It's not there all the time. I'm always alone when it happens. More often when I'm feeling discouraged, sad. So, I don't know. But it's interesting, too.
Benna, do you think you've had a good life?
Oh, yes. Absolutely. In fact, I had thought about starting with, I'm a poor black boy from Mississippi. You know, like Steve Martin did in that movie, but I thought that's probably inappropriate, but then I was gonna follow it with, yeah, my life has been a lot easier and less stressful and complicated than that poor boy in Mississippi's life would have been. So I'm grateful, so grateful for that. I had loving, caring parents who were just solid rock, really, and you know, life, yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
I was just gonna talk about birth and death, how that impacts us as humans.
Come back to it, please.
Yeah.
Which of your three boys had the kidney transplant, and was it when they lived in Lamoni, or when was that? How
Yes,
did
it
we
was
miss
Dan, and
Ben, oh.
Dan,
Dan.
Danny,
Oh, sorry.
yeah. It started when he was in 3rd grade.
Oh,
He
my goodness.
had a purpuric rash on his leg, little purple dots. He called me into the bathroom and said, "Mom, look at this on my legs." And, you know, I kind of freaked out. It could be so many scary things, and called Mark in, and he had the same worried look I did. And so he followed up with lab work, and it was actually Dr. Magley that got us on the right course. He had stomach, because he developed bad stomach pains, and asthma, and we didn't know what was going on. One time he had stomach pain. It wasn't as bad as usual, but I felt like I should keep him home. And I called the Colons over to administer to him, and I remember Les Coleman saying, well, we don't usually administer for stomach aches. But I, you know, I just felt like I should. And then I also felt like I should make a doctor's appointment. And so Dr. Magley saw Danny, and while he was there, he had to run off to the bathroom, and he came back and said, I've got blood in the stool. And Dr. Magley and I ran off to the bathroom to look, and sure enough, he did. And she called Dr. Keurig. I think it was the first move you made. That's what I remember. And Dr. Keurig said, you need to get him to the hospital right away. So we did, and he was assigned a nephrologist, a pediatric hematologist, I think a pulmonologist because of his asthma. He was in the hospital for a whole week, and they concluded he had an autoimmune disease called Henoch-Schönlein purpura. Purpura was the rash on his legs, and that they thought the biggest problem would be his kidneys, because that autoimmune disease attacks kidneys and lungs and the gut. And so they thought he'd eventually need a kidney transplant. So this was in 3rd grade, and we didn't know when that would happen, but he didn't need a transplant until the end of medical school. It's amazing how things worked out for him. And actually, he didn't have it to the end of his residency. His residency was in Roanoke, Virginia, Carilion Medical Center. And they had such a good nephrologist there who wanted Danny to get a transplant right away. But Danny held off for the 3 years of his residency, and at the end, you know, I don't know how he did it. I couldn't have done it. Just fuzzy thinking and just didn't feel good. That's when my knowledge of, you know, renal failure came in handy. I didn't panic. You know, I wasn't in a tizzy about it. I knew he was going to be all right. And I knew if he could hold off dialysis that his transplant would be more successful. So, you know, we thought somebody in our family would probably give him a kidney, but all of us were counted out except for Michael. And Michael started jogging and he lost weight, and he really planned on doing it. And they said at the last minute, somebody else has come in to volunteer to give him a kidney, and we're going to see who's going to be the best fit. It wasn't Michael. He was disappointed. So yeah, it's worked out really well. The kidney donor is now his brother-in-law, and was at the time. He's a really tiny guy, really skinny and tiny. You know, Danny is 6'9".
Well, he's normal compared to our boys.
Well, I don't know. To me, he seemed, well, yeah, if any of you know Jeff Taylor, do you think he's normal? I mean, he's normal. Of course he's normal.
Normal size, you mean?
So, yeah, the kidney has worked really, I don't want to say really well, because his lab results are on the high side of normal. But they're not moving up, they're staying right there. And it's been, how many years? 6 years?
Yeah, his anniversary's next Wednesday.
Yeah. So, we're really grateful and happy he's with us. So.
Back to birth and death.
Oh, birth and death, yeah. This part of my life, it's just hit me how much they impact us in our growth spiritually. Because so many people I love are dying. You know, Mark and I have lost our parents and many aunts and uncles, friends. You know, Tom Moraine's death really hit me hard. I don't know about the rest of you, but so it gets you thinking about what's after this. I spent a lot more time and thought about that. And then we started having grandchildren. And the love and the connection I felt with my own kids, I feel with my grandkids. I didn't expect that. I almost feel like it's the love I felt for Lou. It's a God-given thing.
I gotta go get them.
That's part of our spiritual part of us that,
Better go pick them up.
and, you know, like I've talked about that connection I've had with relatives that have passed over, that's kind of a love thing too, don't you think?
You didn't talk about
I talked about my grandma, remember when I walked, Grandma Elsie,
Oh,
she's
yeah.
my dad's
Okay.
mom. And then about my dad, shortly after he died,
that. Okay.
yeah, and his caressing of my heart was like, thank you.